Greetings. Do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another episode of Walk Magick. Today I have a fun practical text to explore with you, and so we're going to be exploring Liber Batrachophrenoboocosmomachia, subfigura 536. Basically, I'm going to be doing a verse-by-verse walkthrough to help the practitioner, if possible, get the most out of doing this text. I also have an example from one of my own practices of which this text was a major influence, and that'll be at the very end. Let's begin. The title of the book is, to me, meaningless, other than opinions I've heard from others. In Magical and Mystical System of the AA, Eshelman writes that the title roughly translates as, quote, the battle of the frog, the mind, the roar, and the universe, end quote. Numbered under 536, we get in Hebrew, Olam Asaya, the world of action, and we also get Mazloth, which is a title of Chakma, meaning the sphere of the fixed stars. The main bulk of this practice is Dharana-based, holding intensive imagery of the planets in proximity to Earth. But there is some opening practices that then lead to that, so they kind of prepare you for it. The text opens with a quote from the Greater Holy Assembly, which is from the Kabbalah Unveiled, the Kabbalah Denudata, chapter 3, verse 43, quote, within his skull exists daily 13,000 myriad of worlds, which draw their existence from him and by him are upheld, end quote. So there's a link to Kabbalah Denudata down below. I'll not fully break down this verse as it requires the context of the entire chapter to fully break down, but it's worth noting that it's about Macroprosopis, Kether, and that the skull of Macroprosopis corresponds with Nuit via the bowl shaped of the skull, and the skull is associated with Shakti. Thus, through Nuit, Aquarius, and Aquarius itself is associated with the zodiac of the fixed stars. That within the skull of his head, its mind, there are 13,000 myriads of worlds, near infinite, if not infinite universes, and that we as magicians are microcosmic versions of this divine being. Thus, it gives us a glimpse into the mind of man as an infinite resource of creation, though on a scale of the Yetziratic world. 13,000 simply intensifies the number 13, being Achad, unity, and Ahaba, love, both implying the nature of Macroprosopis, and thus the great work in parallel manners. Verse 0, quote, let the practicus study the textbooks of astronomy, travel if need be to a land where the sun and stars are visible, and observe the heavens with the best telescopes to which he may have access. Let him commit to memory the principal facts and, at least roughly, the figures of the science, end quote. This, to me, is one of the most interesting verses in any practice by Crowley. Here, you are actually instructed to study and put into practice some physical science. So you need general information such as the size of the planets of our solar system, especially in relation to one another. You need to know their orbits and their speed. You then, if possible, actually do some observations of the night sky. Of course, with light pollution, this may not be possible for every person. There are, of course, various images from NASA online. There are graphics that have been illustrated, and I would recommend an app such as SkyMap on Android, which uses GPS to show you where everything is in the night sky by pointing your phone in that direction. So it'll give you a full 360 degree. If you point over here, you'll see what constellations, stars, asteroids are there. If you turn, to your right or whatever, you'll see what's going on, or if you look down with your phone, you'll see what's below the earth down there. So everything in the night sky in all directions. I'd also recommend putting this information into use with astrology and seeing how the planets in the night sky then appear on a transit's natal chart. Though this latter is just extracurricular and does not directly affect this particular practice, astrology does come into great importance later on in anybody's great work, just about. You might also look up videos on general relativity, biology, astrophysics. You might even want to look into quantum physics. PBS Spacetime is a great YouTube channel that can give you a lot of information. There are plenty of books out there on all these subjects as well that you could look up. Verse 1, quote, "Now, since these figures will leave no direct impression with any precision upon his mind, let him adopt this practice A." So point A, let the practicus be seated before a bare, square table, and let an unknown number of small, similar objects be thrown by his cella from time to time upon the table, and by that cella be hastily gathered up. Let the practicus declare at a glance, and the cella confirm by his count, the number of such objects." End quote. Note that this is a text for a practicus, that is a magician of the grade of Hode, 3rd degree equals 8 square. This grade revolves around Mercury, which corresponds with Hode, and as you can see, we're already focused upon matters of the intellectual studies of science and training of the mind to be quick. A cella is a student or disciple. Now, if you happen to be solitary, any trusted friend might work. After doing this for a while, you alternate with point B, which we'll discuss momentarily. But here for point A, you can have any number of small objects of the same kind tossed down on a table. You want to only have a few seconds, starting out maybe 5 seconds to take a glance at them before they're snatched up. And then your guess is logged down in a tally book along with the actual number of objects thrown by the student. I suggest appraising the results all at once at the end so as not to break the practice and to get more tosses in during a session. Note that it isn't done in rapid succession, throw after throw, but at random intervals. This forces the practicus to be paying attention for the duration of the session, not knowing when the next throw is going to be. Instructions for practice A continues, quote, "The practice should be for a quarter of an hour thrice daily. The maximum number of objects should at first be 7. This maximum should increase by 1 at each practice, provided that not a single mistake is made by the practicus in appreciating the number thrown. This practice should continue assiduously for at least 1 year. The quickness of the cella in gathering up the objects is expected to increase with time. The practice need not be limited to a quarter of an hour thrice daily after a time, but increased with discretion. Care must be taken to detect the first symptoms of fatigue and to stop, if possible, even before it threatens. The practice psychologist learns to recognize even minute hesitations that mark the forcing of the attention." End quote. The instructions just stated about starting with 7 items and then increasing don't necessarily make sense because you doing this practice shouldn't know the number of items about to be thrown. They should be unknown. That said, I think it makes a point of making sure the number of items is high enough, but not too high when you're starting off. I would recommend somewhere between 6 and 12. I think that's good at the beginning. Everything else stated is straightforward. Over time, the items tossed are picked up quicker. So let's say you start with like 6 or 7 seconds even. After 6 or 7 months doing this, as long as you've been getting them right, it should be like 3 seconds, and then they're scooped up really quick. This is to be done daily over the course of a year or until the mind is quick enough to grasp a large number of stimuli at a glance with precision. And note most especially that you are only starting with about 15-minute sessions. You do not want to strain yourself. The same way asana must be practiced where you increase your duration only a little over the course of months because you could hurt your joints, is the same way you practice this so that you don't strain your mind. This is an exercise. Think about when you're working out. You don't lift more than you can safely handle, otherwise you'll hurt yourself and need downtime to heal before continuing. Most especially, you don't want to hurt your mind. You don't want your mind being strained or overly frustrated. The point of this practice is to increase the sharpness and speed of mental processing, not to debilitate it. We move on to verse 2, quote, "Alternating with the above, let the practicus begin this practice B. It is assumed that he has thoroughly conquered the elemental difficulties of Dharana and is able to prevent mental pictures from altering shape, size, and color against his will." End quote. So basically, if you've made it to the grade of practicus, 3rd degree equals 8 square, You will have long ago mastered the practices of Liber E, and you're still using them in conjunction with more advanced practices. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how vital Dharana is to create imagery on the astral plane, let alone the mental fortitude it breeds. I've spoken a lot about Dharana and concentration on this channel. Quote, point B. Seated in the open air, let him endeavor to form a complete mental picture of himself and his immediate surroundings. It is important that he should be in the center of such picture and able to look freely in all directions. The finished picture should be a complete consciousness of the whole fixed, clear, and definite, end quote. This process of looking backwards is always the most difficult if you're creating a 360-degree view. I can astral travel, but try entering an astral body and looking at one's own body and behind oneself, and the imagery always gets muddled or at least feels awkward. Still, do your best to visualize a 360-degree view in your mind of yourself and your immediate surroundings. Quote, let him gradually add to this picture by including objects more and more distant until he have an image of the whole field of vision. He will probably discover that it is very difficult to increase the apparent size of the picture as he proceeds, and it should be his most earnest endeavor to do so. He should seek in particular to appreciate distances, almost to the point of combating the laws of perspective, end quote. Now this is getting close to the praxis of this text. You are creating mental images of your immediate space and slowly increasing the scope of how much you see in terms of area and detail. You want to see all objects of the room you're in, or if you're outside, say in a forest, you want to be able to push the boundary of what mental image you're creating further and further out in all directions. If you're in a room, every crease in the hardwood floor or tuft in the carpet should be visible. Of course, don't get caught up in any one detail. Create the mental image as a whole, as you would see it with your eyes. If you're outdoors, it's better because you could go further distances. And it says in that previous quote, let's say you're, on a beach or something, getting all the way to the horizon, try to create that mental visual of this whole wide sphere of open space and everything happening in that open space. If you're at the beach again, as an example, the waves in the far off distance moving, but try to keep that distance where it is and keep your perspective where you're seated so that you create that, how could I say it? Vision of perspective of distance. The immediate benefit of going through this type of practice is first and foremost awareness. Over time, if you keep at this practice, you'll be able to perceive things where they are at a glance and maintain an awareness of them being there in your mind. This, combined with point A, is vital for sensing subtle cues in the environment, the type of awareness needed of a martial artist, let alone doing your will by knowing what objects appear in space to be interacted with. And this type of awareness can keep you even safe in public spaces, as your reaction time should also increase. We now get to the meat and potatoes. Verse 3, quote, these practices A and B accomplished, and his studies in astronomy completed, let him attempt this practice C, end quote. Now, admittedly, this one takes some serious time to go through, and I recommend you do not rush it. Spend some months making attempts. There is no set, definite timeline, but you will know when you have completed it. Quote, point C, let the practicus form a mental picture of the earth, in particular striving to realize the size of the earth in comparison with himself, and let him not be content until by assiduity he has well succeeded. Let him add the moon, keeping well in mind the relative of sizes of and distance between the planet and its satellite, end quote. So now we are piecing the former practices together. Your study of astronomy, your ability to create images based on spatial awareness, the ability to see many objects at once is all going to come into play. You begin as stated. Some many sessions in your asana are spent visualizing the earth in appropriate size, and you want to keep that image of the earth with an awareness of how large it is in scale to yourself based on where you are. If this process isn't humbling to you, I suggest you halt and go back to Liber Libre. After you feel you've got a good enough grasp on that, no images in your head are moving, everything's stable, you're able to maintain an awareness of yourself In relation to this visual of the Earth, you then add the moon, paying attention to the distance proportion to the Earth and the speed of its rotation around the Earth. And yes, still remaining aware of the scale of these objects in relation to yourself. Quote, he will probably find the final trick of the mind to be a constant disappearance of the image, and the appearance of the same upon a smaller scale. The trick he must outwit by constancy of endeavor. He will then add in turn Venus, Mars, Mercury, and the Sun. It is permissible at this stage to change the point of view to the center of the Sun, and to do so may add stability to the conception. End quote. So here we go. You are now viewing the solar system, or at least a major portion of it, and shifting your viewpoint from yourself to the Sun, which of course leads to a very perhaps lifelong meditation on the identification of oneself with the Sun. Quote, the practicus may then add the asteroids Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. The utmost attention to detail is now necessary as the picture is highly complex, apart from the difficulty of appreciating relative size and distance. Let this picture be practiced month after month until it is absolutely perfect. The tendency which may manifest itself to pass into dhyana and samadhi must be resolutely combated with the whole strength of the mind. End quote. You do not want to induce an altered state of consciousness with this practice. You want to remain in full control and keep these mental images objective. Do not enter a state of union with any of the planets, not even the Sun, in this practice. The point is to train the mind to hold information and images. Coming into union with objects is a completely different practice altogether, meant for higher grades than practicus. In this practice, Mercury is information, not experience per se. Quote, let the practicus then recommence the picture, starting from the Sun and adding the planets one by one, each with its proper motion, until they have an image perfect in all respects of the solar system as it actually exists. Let him particularly note that unless the apparent size approximate to the real, his practice is wasted. Let him then add a comet to the picture. He may find perhaps that the path of this comet may assist him to expand the sphere of his mental vision until it include a star. End quote. So you want to now, at this point, once you've mastered just creating them all at once, do them one by one. Start with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, each one until you go further out, and then hold that image for long durations. You know, if you could get to 25 minutes, half hour, well done. You know, at that point, it says you might add asteroids. And for example, well, it says comets, but you might add asteroids such as Lilith, if that's preferable. And these are images and not invocations, so I see no harm in adding some malefic asteroids, though it may be safe to simply add random space debris for the purpose of scale, or proper comets, such as Halley's Comet. Of course, you should then know the path of said comets if you're going to use any particular one. Quote, and thus, gathering one star after another, let his contemplation become vast as the heavens, in space and time, ever aspiring to the perception of the body of Nuit, yea, the body of Nuit. End quote. So from there, after you could get the solar system, you could expand outwards to more space and more space and more space. Eventually, if you get something so big, it's just going to be tiny pinpricks of light everywhere, and then you're meditating upon Nuit and holding this visual of at least the observable universe in your mind. So I want to move on to something aside from this text, and this is one way that this particular practice influenced and enhanced one of my own personal rituals elsewhere. So on this channel, I have a guided meditation called the Circulation of Light. Basically, you use light absorbed from the earth to be drawn upwards and illuminate Kether, and you then use Kether to spin it around your external and internal body as a cleansing and charging visual meditation / energy working. One thing I did not talk about in that guided meditation is that this practice can be altered. Instead of absorbing light from the earth, you locate and visualize a specific planet, say Mercury for healing, in proximity to the earth and yourself. You then visualize a beam of light extending either from your heart chakra, since it's pretty center of your being, so it's kind of, I don't want to say neutral, but it kind of works with any type of energy almost. Or you can use a corresponding Sephiroth located on that part of the body to extend the shaft of light directly to that planet connecting to your body, which this shaft acts as an umbilical cord with the planetary body. And so you end up absorbing light directly from that planet instead of the Earth, which then charges Kether, and you use to polarize your body of light, attuning it to that planet. So then you would do this circulation of light as normal. Your body is charged with mercurial energy, and then you could do whatever healing ritual that you want to do, or whatever Mercury corresponds with, right? It could be you're going to do a public speaking gig, or you're going to write some type of book, or you're digging through information. Those are all things that you can use this mercurial circulation of light to first charge yourself and then do a ritual with the planet Mercury. The next stage is then to work with 2 or more planets. And I've done renditions by visualizing all 7 classical planets in their exact proximity to Earth at that moment, extending 7 shafts of light from the heart to them, each shaft being in the color of the queen scale associated with the planet. Or you can use the Sephiroth or path, depending upon the type of work you are doing. You then take energy in, absorb it from all of the planets, thereafter completing the circulation of light as one normally would. This is a really great way to go about harmonizing the planetary energies within oneself in a quick 15 to 20 minute visual exercise, or setting up for either Kundalini or other chakra-based rituals such as Liber Batrachophrenoboocosmomachia, which states in verses 15 and 16, quote, "Also thou shalt excite the wheels with the 5 wounds and the 5 wounds. Then thou shalt excite the wheels with the 2 and the 3rd in the midst, even Saturn and Jupiter, Sun and Moon, Mars and Venus and Mercury." End quote. In closing, the main practice of this text is point C, while points A and B are preliminary training. The result of going through this Liber is ultimately a first stage towards cosmic awareness. We work with the path of the sun in Liber Resh. We make ourselves aware of the planets in Liber Batrachophrenoboocosmomachia, and then an awareness of the zodiac is next. There is no official AA Liber that deals with this latter zodiac awareness, but you might check out my episode on this channel about the magical retreat, which I do speak briefly about using the zodiac as a 12-day intensive ritual cycle, where I nearly was doing like a Liber Resh, but with the Wheel of the Zodiac instead. So that's something you could listen to and puzzle out what I was doing, and maybe find a way to adapt some type of practice to your own needs based on the zodiac, based on what I was talking about in that video. Love is the law, love under will. I'll catch you all in the next one.